I never believed fate would ever glance my way. People like me, ordinary women who spent decades working long shifts, paying bills, and raising children, didn't suddenly stumble into fortune. We worked until our backs ached, until our hands grew stiff, and we told ourselves it was worth it if our children had better lives. That had always been my mantra. But one cold Friday evening in Boston, everything I thought I knew about life cracked open like glass under pressure. I bought the lottery ticket almost absent-mindedly at a corner store on Boylston Street, the kind of quick pick you grab when the clerk says, "Jackpot's rolling over, you never know." I smiled, nodded, stuffed it into my coat pocket, and forgot about it. Until the next night. The television flickered in my modest living room, the sound low but the bright colors bouncing against the walls. My eyes widened as the numbers were read out one by one, each syllable etching itself into my chest like a heartbeat. The ticket in my trembling hand matched every single number. My throat closed. $30 million. 30. After the inevitable deductions and taxes, I would still hold around 15 million. A figure so far from anything I'd ever touched it might as well have been a dream. I sat there frozen, clutching the ticket as though it were alive, afraid that if I blinked, the paper would crumble into dust. 67 years old, my life nearly spent, and suddenly a tidal wave of possibility had crashed at my doorstep. I thought of my children instantly. They had always been my reason for pushing forward through the long, lonely years after the divorce. Benjamin, my eldest, serious and ambitious. Claire, my youngest, artistic, restless, always reaching for something beyond her grasp. They were my world, even when the world itself seemed indifferent to me. For a long time, I had dreamed of giving them more than love. Love, yes, I had poured that endlessly into them, but security, the kind that kept them safe from the world's claws, had always eluded me. Now, with this miracle, I could give them both homes of their own. Grand homes, with space to breathe, gardens to grow in, comfort to build families within. And beyond that, $1 million check for each, so they would never have to worry about bills or rent or scrape together paychecks again. I pictured their faces lighting up when I revealed the surprise, imagined Benjamin's stern mouth softening into a smile, Claire's eyes widening in disbelief. It was perfect. It was what I had always wanted. And the timing seemed touched by destiny. My birthday loomed just 1 week away. For years I had hosted modest dinners, laying out the best china I could afford, cooking their favorite dishes, filling the house with warmth even when the silence between us sometimes felt like a storm waiting to break. This year, I thought, would be different. This year, the table would not only hold food but the future. I spent the following days in a flurry of secret preparations. The real estate contracts sat ready in a neat folder, the checks tucked carefully into envelopes embossed with their names. I ordered fresh linens, polished the silverware, planned each course of the meal down to the smallest detail. Benjamin adored spicy dishes, always challenging himself with heat levels most people wouldn't dare, while Claire favored sweet and sour combinations that reminded her of the years she'd spent dabbling in cooking classes. I would make them both, set them side by side, a feast that spoke of care and devotion. As the day arrived, I felt lighter than I had in years. I laid the table with trembling but hopeful hands, the flicker of candlelight making the room glow like something out of a dream. My heart thudded with anticipation as the clock ticked toward 7. They would arrive, they would sit, we would laugh, and I would reveal everything. The years of sacrifice, the nights of loneliness, all of it would finally be redeemed in this one evening. But as the minutes slipped by, the glow began to dim. At 8, the dishes still steamed untouched, the glasses empty, my hands nervously smoothing the tablecloth over and over again. At 9, Benjamin texted, a curt message. Caught up at work, might be late. Claire's voice came earlier that afternoon, a rushed apology about staying late at the gallery where she interned, promising she'd try to stop by. But try was never a promise, and I knew it. At 10, the food had grown cold. I reheated the dishes once, then again, as if heat alone could keep hope alive. My calls went unanswered, my messages unread. I typed into our small family group chat, "When will you both be here?" and watched the screen with desperate eyes, waiting for the reassuring tick that meant they had seen it. The screen stayed stubbornly blank. By 11, the candles had guttered into nothing but smoke. My shoulders sagged as I moved from the elegant table to the lonely couch, the envelopes and contracts staring back at me from the coffee table like silent witnesses. 2 houses, 2 checks, a lifetime of dreams, and not a soul to give them to. The silence pressed heavy against my chest, louder than any noise could have been. I tried to swallow the feeling, to tell myself they would explain tomorrow, that work and life sometimes made monsters of us all. But when midnight struck and the phone finally buzzed, the voice on the other end wasn't filled with relief or love. It was Claire, her tone weary, hurried. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I just can't tonight. It's too late. Go to bed, okay?" Before I could reply, the line went dead. Something cracked in me then. It wasn't just about the birthday. It was about years of sacrifice, of giving everything until I had nothing left for myself. Was this what I had built my life on? Children who could forget me so easily, who could choose convenience over the woman who had raised them alone. My hands shook as I set the phone down, the tears I had held back for decades finally spilling in hot, silent streams. Sleep took me on the couch, but it was not restful. The night pressed down with a suffocating weight, and when I woke with the pale light of dawn seeping through the curtains, I felt a hollow where my heart had once been. I walked outside, needing air, needing something that didn't remind me of the cold plates on the table or the silence on the phone. My neighbor, Patricia, spotted me as she walked her golden retriever along the street. "You're usually up early, Margaret," she said kindly, her breath clouding in the crisp morning air. "Late night." I forced a smile, unwilling to confess the truth, that I had spent hours waiting for children who never came. Patricia, practical as ever, shook her head. "I've told you before. Book a dinner at a restaurant next time. Less work, less heartbreak. You go through all this effort for them, but do they even notice?" Her words stung, sharper than she knew. Did they notice? Did they ever see me, truly see me, or had I become invisible in their world of careers and social circles? As I walked on, another figure appeared, one I hadn't expected. Deborah, a woman I had worked with years ago, her face always pinched with jealousy and thinly veiled disdain. She stopped in front of me, her lips curling in that familiar sneer. "Still waiting on those kids to give you love?" she asked, her voice dripping with venom. I stiffened, ready to pass her by without a word, but she pulled her phone from her coat pocket and shoved it toward me. "Look," she said with cruel glee. The video played before I could push it away. My children, Benjamin and Claire, laughing and smiling, standing beside their father, and beside Rebecca. The woman who had shattered my marriage, who had stolen the life I thought was mine. They were all together, celebrating at some glittering restaurant, glasses raised, laughter echoing. And then the dagger, my granddaughter, small and bright, tugging on Rebecca's sleeve, her little voice ringing clear. "Grandma Rebecca, you're so much prettier than my other grandma." The world tilted beneath me. My lungs refused to fill. Rebecca, the interloper, the thief of years, was now grandmother in my granddaughter's eyes. My children had chosen her, embraced her, replaced me. Deborah's laugh followed me as I stumbled away, each step heavier than the last. Her words echoed cruelly, "They don't need you anymore. You gave them everything, and they've turned their backs." I reached my house, collapsed onto the couch, and this time the tears came like a flood. All the nights of sacrifice, the double shifts, the meals skipped so they could eat, all of it reduced to nothing in a single night. And yet, as the tears burned themselves out, leaving me hollow and trembling, something else stirred inside. Something faint, like the first sliver of dawn after an endless night. For the first time, a thought whispered that I had always silenced before. What about me? I sat there for a long time with my hands pressed flat to my knees, breathing slowly until the edges of the room steadied. The envelopes with their names, Benjamin, Claire, lay where I'd set them, stark as tombstones on the coffee table. I slid them back into the drawer and shut it softly, as if noise alone might crack what little strength I had left. When I finally slept, it was the thin, brittle sleep of someone who's convinced herself mourning will make things easier. Mourning does not make betrayal easier. It only makes it clearer. By noon I had brewed coffee twice and finished neither cup. I told myself I was waiting for them to call, to say there'd been a fire drill at the office or a subway shutdown, a story I could wrap around the empty places like a scarf. The phone stayed dumb and heavy. At last, I reached for a different number. It rang twice before a warm, professional voice answered and introduced herself as a partner at a small firm just off State Street. I gave her my name and, after a pause that felt like stepping off a cliff, told her I needed to discuss estate planning. The words tasted like iron. She didn't ask why. People who call lawyers about wills usually don't want to be asked why. We met that afternoon in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling glass that reflected my face in duplicate. I looked older than I'd felt last week and younger than I'd felt last night. I explained about the ticket, the win, the sums that made her brows lift for a bare second before smoothing again. I told her I had intended to buy 2 homes and cut 2 checks, and I told her, quietly, that I was rethinking everything. I want something airtight, I said. Something that goes where I decide, not where anyone thinks they can steer it. She spoke of philanthropic vehicles, of a donor-advised fund that could give in my name to places that would use money the way I had used my time, carefully, with attention. She spoke of trusts that would activate upon my death, of safeguards and clauses and language as precise as a surgeon's hands. When she slid the draft across the table later that week, I felt a cool, lucid calm. The life I had given to other people did not require me to die for them too. That night I walked through my house, the house I had kept alive through winters that froze the pipes and summers that made the walls sweat, and saw it the way a stranger would. The framed photographs of birthday cakes and elementary school art fairs, the sofa I'd replaced after the divorce when David took the good one to his new townhouse, the nick in the dining room table where Claire, 5 years old, had banged her cup so hard the wood yielded. I ran a finger over that nick and told the room, thank you, because it had held us when nothing else did. Then I called a realtor. The sign went up 2 days later. By the end of the month, a young couple with a toddler walked through the front door and fell in love with the sunlight in the kitchen, the way it pooled like honey on the tile. They made an offer above asking and I took it. I packed in quiet. Benjamin texted once, work is insane, can we catch up next week? Claire sent a heart emoji when I wrote to say I was doing some changes and wouldn't host Sunday dinner for a while. Neither asked what the changes were. I did not tell them. There's a kind of cruelty that looks like gentleness from a distance. I had spent years at that distance. I was done. I moved to a small carriage house in Jamaica Plain, a place tucked down a narrow lane lined with maples that blazed like torches in October. It wasn't grand. It didn't need to be. There was a square of garden where I could grow herbs, a low stone wall that warmed in the sun, windows that opened to the smell of rain. For the first week, I cooked only for myself, simple things, eggs, tomatoes blistered in a pan, an apple sliced with care, and marveled at how quiet food could be when it was not a performance. It took me time to say the next thought out loud. If I was going to keep breathing, the breath would need purpose. I had an idea older than my divorce and almost as old as Benjamin, one I had pushed to the back of the shelf each time a bill came due. A little bookshop with a corner for coffee and a corner for children to read. A place you could go when the world made you feel like a wrong note and you needed a song to lean against. It sounded sentimental until I pictured the shelves, the spines like a low skyline, the chalkboard with the day's brew, the warmth. I called it Page and Anchor because everyone needs something to hold them steady. Leasing a sliver of a brick-front space on Center Street felt like buying back a part of my own voice. I learned about inspections and sinks and ADA clearances. I learned I had the patience to taste 10 roasts and pick the one that tasted like dark chocolate when it cooled. I interviewed baristas and booksellers who didn't look past me the way people sometimes do with older women. I didn't select the ones with perfect resumes. I chose the ones who listened with their eyes. 2 were in wheelchairs. One was a gentle young man with a stutter and an encyclopedic memory for poetry. One was a mother who needed a schedule that bent around her child's therapy appointments. I posted our opening hours with a note in the window. We hire for kindness. The shop opened on a Tuesday in late spring. The first customers were neighbors who said welcome and meant it. The second was Patricia, who hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would complain. She bought an armful of mysteries and cried at the counter when she saw the small sign that read Pay It Forward. Prepaid coffee for anyone who needs it today. You did it, she whispered. You finally did something that wasn't for them. I smiled and looked at the door as if I expected to see Benjamin or Claire walk in, repentant, changed. The door stayed a door. Success does not always look the way you think. Ours looked like steady mornings and afternoons that grew loud and then gentle again, like children dragging their fingers along book spines and adults who came in for coffee and left with a paperback they had not planned to buy. We hosted a Saturday story hour, a Thursday poetry reading, a quiet grief group once a month that drank tea and sat with each other in a corner where the light was kind. I was tired every night and slept like someone who had done her best with the day she was given. It was almost 3 months after the move when the past knocked. It was a sound I recognized in my bones. Too many years listening for a key in a lock, a foot on a stair. I wiped my hands, walked to the door, and opened it to find Benjamin and Claire on the step, and behind them, as if the universe had a taste for irony, David with Rebecca at his shoulder. Their faces arranged themselves into a politeness that made my skin prickle. It was the arrangement you make at a stranger's funeral. "We've been trying to reach you," Benjamin said, the lines around his mouth deeper than I remembered. "Your number, did you change it?" Claire was worried. I held the door as you hold something breakable. "I'm not missing," I said. "I'm living my life. You should be living yours." Rebecca's gaze swept past me into the small living room, curious the way a person is when they're considering a rental. She had always dressed like a magazine ad for a life that looked effortless. Soft cashmere, glinting earrings that caught light like bait. She smiled as if we were old friends. David didn't smile. He looked smaller inside his suit than he had when we were married. Guilt can shrink a man or swell him, and in David it had done both and then left him deflated. Claire stepped forward then, and I saw her hand drift unconsciously to her stomach. The gesture said what words hadn't. She was pregnant. A silver ring glittered on her finger I hadn't noticed in photos. "Mom," she said, and the word was soft and brittle at once. I know you said years ago you'd help with a wedding gift. Liam and we moved the date up. The baby. We could use." Her voice faltered. She looked past me toward the couch as if the money might be sitting there like a well-behaved dog. I didn't move. "I don't have anything left to give you, Claire." My voice surprised me. Not cruel, not cold. A weather report. "If you need help, go to Rebecca. She's the one you chose." Something ugly moved over her features. For a second she looked like a child who had been told the party was over. Then the words burst from her, hard and desperate. "You ruined everything for us. If you hadn't made a scene at City Hall, if you hadn't," she swallowed, blinked, changed tacks. "You cut us off. You disappeared. You don't even answer texts." "I answered for decades," I said. "I answered with my life. I'm answering myself now." Benjamin put a hand on her arm. He had his father's posture when he wanted to look like a mediator, measured, sane, above the fray. "Mom," he said carefully, "no one wants a fight. We're just asking for the help you promised." He glanced back at David, who stared at my doorway as if it were going to decide something for him. Rebecca tilted her head. Sympathetic performance perfected. I shook my head slowly. The help I promised belonged to another season. That season is over. Silence gathered in the doorway. For a moment I thought of stepping aside so they could see the little kitchen, the bright mugs on the hooks, the vase of tulips Patricia had brought. I thought of making coffee. Old muscles remember old habits. Then I set the old muscle down like a box and said, "You should go." Claire's face drained. She waited for me to soften. When I did not, she turned away, her shoulders a hard line. Benjamin followed, his jaw working. David opened his mouth. "Margaret, he stopped when he saw my hand lift in a small, final gesture. He looked to Rebecca, and she gave him what she always gave him, a way to do nothing that felt like something. They went down the path without looking back. I closed the door and leaned my forehead against the wood, surprised to find that what I felt was not triumph and not grief but a strange lightness. The weight I'd carried for so long had slipped a notch. Life shrank to a manageable size after that. Wake, open the shop, greet the regulars, teach Nora how to steam milk without scalding it, ask Jamal about his English class, order more copies of the poetry collection that somehow sold out twice. When I thought of Benjamin and Claire, I tried to send them a kind thought the way you send light across water. Sometimes the light got there. Sometimes it didn't. That is not my fault, I told myself. That is the wind. Summer slid into fall and the maples went to fire. The sidewalk outside the shop filled with leaves that crunched like old letters. On a Tuesday morning, the phone rang at the counter while I was sorting a shipment of new releases. An unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail and then, without fully knowing why, I answered. Margaret. The voice was a rasp, gentled by pain. It's me. David. There are apologies that come like rain and some that come like dust. His came like the last snow of the season. Thin, unexpected, melting as it landed. I wanted to say I'm sorry, he said, and I heard hospital beeps behind him, the flat orchestration of a machine that never sleeps. For everything. The same lightness rose in me, the one that had surprised me in the doorway months ago. I waited for heat, anger, relief, something to flare, and felt only a stillness deep enough to sit in. I hope you make peace with what you can, David, I said. Goodbye. When I hung up, the shop hummed around me the way it always did, and I felt no urge to cry or laugh or call anyone. Not all closures close with sound. He died before the first snow. I know because Benjamin texted me a link to the obituary. A tidy paragraph that made a life look like a straight road. My mother called that night, angry with tears. You should have gone to see him, she said. You should have done the right thing. I looked at my hands, flour-dusted from the lemon bars we serve on Thursdays, and told her gently that sometimes the right thing is not the expected thing. She hung up with a sigh that sounded like a door closing in an old house. Grief did not arrive. Relief did not, either. What arrived was space. I filled it with mornings that smelled like espresso and cinnamon, with evenings where I read on the couch under the small lamp and did not check my phone, with Sunday walks around Jamaica Pond when the water slicked itself with light and the joggers nodded like parishioners in some easy church. The shop's pay-it-forward jar filled and emptied. People who had always been hungry for a place to belong found one. I belonged, too. Sometimes belonging to yourself is the bravest belonging. Every so often, someone who knew me from before came in and looked around as if I were a painting they had seen half finished and forgot to check on. Deborah came once, hair sharp as ever, eyes scanning for something to crow about. So this is it, she said, like a verdict. A tiny little place. Yes, I said. And it's exactly the size of my life now. She left without buying anything. That's all right. Not every visitor is a customer and not every spectator is an audience. On a Saturday in December, a woman about my age lingered by the local author's shelf and then brought a memoir to the counter, the kind written in sentences that look simple and carry lead. I lost my boy last year, she said without looking up. Some days I come here to remember that the world still knows how to carry a story. I slid the book into a bag and said her coffee was covered today and tomorrow and however many days she needed. When she lifted her eyes to mine, I saw the look I used to tilt at the mirror, someone who wants to keep living even when the people she loves have walked into the dark. That night, after closing, Patricia and I sat on the low stone wall outside my carriage house with our coats zipped to our chins. The air smelled like snow coming. You look lighter, she said, tilting her head at me. You know that. I feel untethered, I said, searching. But in a good way. Like the rope was cutting my hands and now they can heal. She laughed softly. Page and Anchor, she said, teasing. You named a place Anchor and then cut the rope. Maybe the anchor isn't supposed to be a person, I said. Maybe it's supposed to be a place. Or a promise. To whom? She asked. To myself, I said, and felt the truth of it scratch a match in my chest. I expected the holidays to make me flinch. The old rituals have a way of ringing like alarms. Instead, the shop twined itself with twinkle lights and the neighborhood brought in tins of cookies, and I watched our staff draw up a schedule that made sure everyone got a day with their people. On Christmas Eve, I closed early and walked home down streets that smelled of wood smoke. At my door I paused, listening for footsteps that were not mine. The only sound was the soft hush of snow beginning. I went inside, warmed milk on the stove, and read until my eyes blurred. It was simple. It was enough. It was late January when the next message came from Benjamin. Not an ask. Not a demand. Just a photograph of a baby bundled in a knit hat, eyes shut tight against the world, mouth pursed as if considering a secret. Underneath, 3 words, "Her name's Wren." I stared at the picture a long time, then set the phone down and looked at the ceiling and told the universe I hoped Wren would be loved by every person who held her, even if one of them was a woman who had taught my granddaughter to call her grandma Rebecca. Love hoarded turned sour. Love offered, even silently, ripens into something somebody can eat. I didn't write back that night. I wrote 2 days later. "Congratulations. She's beautiful. Take care of her mother." He sent a single heart. It was not reconciliation. It was not even a path. It was a seed. Seeds do not always grow. Sometimes they sleep. I can live with that. In February, I added a small notice to the shop window. Community table, no questions asked. The first afternoon, a man I recognized from the shelter 2 blocks over came in and sat there with a paperback and a coffee someone else had prepaid, and the look on his face made something rise in me that felt like a hymn. I don't mean to make it sound grand. It wasn't grand. It was 1 table and 1 cup and 1 man whose shoulders unhitched for half an hour. But I had spent years giving to people who mistook my giving for their right. Now I was giving to people who understood the geometry of gratitude. It changed the shape of the day. Spring came again, because it always does, whether we think we deserve it or not, and the maples fattened with new green. I found myself talking to the seedlings in my herb bed the way I used to talk to sleepy children on school mornings. Up you get. The sun is here. In the shop, we hosted a book club for first-time readers who had decided they were tired of being embarrassed. Watching a 62-year-old man sound out a paragraph and then look up with wet eyes taught me more about courage than any self-help book I'd ever stocked. One rainy Thursday, a young woman with a round belly and a backpack came in, bought nothing, sat at the back table and cried quietly for 20 minutes. I walked over, set a glass of water in front of her, and asked if she wanted me to sit or leave. "Sit," she whispered, and when the words came, they came like floodwater. Her mother had told her she was foolish, her boyfriend had told her she was trapping him, the clinic had told her she had 2 weeks to decide anything at all. "I don't even know what I want," she said. "I just know I don't want to be alone." "You aren't," I said, and I meant only that right then, in that hour, in that chair, she was not alone. Later, when she left, she squeezed my hand and I thought, this is what money should do when you have it. Make chairs and hours where people can sit and remember they matter. At night, sometimes, I would take the envelopes with Benjamin and Claire's names from the drawer where I had hidden them the night everything changed. I didn't open them. I only touched them the way you touch a relic to prove to yourself that history happened and that you are permitted to walk away from it. Then I'd put them back and sleep. If you had asked me 5 years ago what freedom looked like at 68, I would have said it looked like a long vacation with no alarm clock. I would not have said it looks like a small bell above a door that chimes when someone comes in from the rain, like a staff calendar with notes scribbled in the margins about doctor's appointments and finals week, like a shelf where a child's sticky hand reaches for a book about a quiet rabbit. But this is freedom, too. Maybe this is the only kind that lasts, the kind that builds itself out of small, repeating mercies. And if you ask about Benjamin and Claire, what will happen, whether they will circle back like birds who remember the way to a familiar roof, I will tell you what I tell myself when the shop is dark and the street lamp makes a river on the floor. People change if they want to. I have changed because I wanted to. I left a life that asked me to be a well with no bottom and chose one where I can fill a cup and hand it to whoever is thirsty and still have enough left to drink. If my children come to me thirsty one day, and if they come with open hands instead of open mouths, I will pour. If they come to take, I will bless them at the door and let them walk on. For the first time since I can remember, that thought does not terrify me. It does not even hurt. It just is, the way spring is, the way maps are, the way the ocean is bigger than the boats that try to master it. I am not anyone's boat anymore. I am the shore. 3 years later, the bell above the shop door chimed with the same bright note it had made on opening day. Paige and Anchor had grown quietly, like ivy climbing brick, steady, patient, rooted in kindness. The shelves bore the wear of eager hands, the tables carried a history of coffee rings and whispered conversations, and the windows glowed each evening like lanterns against the Boston dusk. Margaret, now 70, found herself smiling more often than frowning. She no longer thought in terms of what she had lost. She thought in terms of what she had made. The shop had become something larger than she had imagined. Local schools brought children in for reading circles. Young writers hosted workshops in the evenings. Community volunteers held tutoring sessions in the back corner. Every wall hummed with stories, not just the ones in print but the ones spilling from living voices. Margaret had discovered that when you build a space with warmth, people bring their lives inside and let them breathe. On a cool autumn afternoon, she was arranging a display of poetry when Patricia, her neighbor and friend, stepped in with her golden retriever tugging at the leash. "You've turned this place into the heart of the neighborhood," Patricia said proudly. "Do you realize that?" Margaret laughed softly. "It's not me. It's everyone who walks in. I just keep the doors open." But she knew that wasn't quite true. It was her. It was her choice to stay standing when she could have collapsed. It was her choice to turn grief into foundation stone, betrayal into kindling for something new. She thought sometimes of Benjamin and Claire. They didn't visit the shop, though she suspected Claire had peeked through the window once, face half hidden beneath a scarf, hesitant to cross the threshold. Benjamin sent a message every few months. Photos of little Wren toddling across a lawn, later drawings scrawled in bright crayon. Margaret never asked for more, never pushed for less. She responded with short blessings. She looks strong. She looks happy. It was enough. For now. One evening, as she closed the register, she found herself staring at the envelopes she had never thrown away. They sat in a small box in the office, still crisp, still marked with their names. She didn't cry anymore when she touched them. Instead, she felt a strange gratitude. Those envelopes had been the pivot, the moment she realized she had given enough to others and could begin giving to herself. She slipped them back into the drawer, not as relics of pain but as reminders of change. Winter came with its sharp winds and quiet streets. The shop stayed warm, smelling of cinnamon and paper, full of voices that pushed back the dark. On New Year's Eve, Margaret stood at the door as the snow fell, listening to laughter ripple from inside. She had no need for champagne or grand celebrations. Her celebration was here, a place alive with light because she had chosen not to let herself be extinguished. And when the first dawn of January spilled gold across the Boston rooftops, Margaret whispered a vow she had kept since the night everything had changed: "I will never again live invisible. I will live as my own anchor, and as a page no one else can write." For the first time in her long life, that vow didn't feel like defiance. It felt like peace.